Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Chassidus in the morning. 15 minutes. Change your life. Hachana for Purim. It's a Purim maamer from Torah Ohr from the Alter Rebbe. Okay, let's jump straight into it. So basically, this maamer, I don't know how far we'll get in the limited amount of time we have, but we'll do whatever we can. Basically, this maamer talks a lot about the story of, the Megillah, but in terms of our avodah and how the Megillah relates to us. And essentially, he's talking about that there's a story in the Megillah. Well, part of what happens in the story of the Megillah is that Esther. That's something else I wanted to say, that if you haven't read through the storyline of the Megillah, you should. It's an amazing story, amazing read. And I think a lot of times we don't see the whole forest, but we see little trees. And so we hear little stories, but we don't hear the whole picture. And I was reading it over Shabbos, and we have a lot, like any of these books, we look at it online, give you a summary, very interesting. So basically what happened was at a certain point, so Haman gets Achashverosh to sign off to make the 13th of Adar a day to kill the Jews. And Mordechai finds out about it, and Mordechai goes to tell Esther. He tells Esther, and he says, you need to go speak to the king. It's a long story, but she says that I haven't been summoned to the king. I can't just come in. I could die. So Mordechai says, basically, you got to go. Maybe this is the whole reason why you're here. And he goes, don't worry, we're going to be saved. The question is going to come for you or someone else? And this could be your opportunity. And enough, so she says, fine. She goes, tell everyone she could fast for me. And then for 3 days, and then I'll go in. And so she goes to greet the king. She goes to greet him. She meets him outside. And he puts out his scepter. And she touches the scepter. We're going to read about this. And then she asked to have a Suda, and that's the whole story. He has the Suda, and then that night he can't sleep, and then he realizes he hasn't given Mordechai his due, what is due to him from saving the king. And then the next time they have another Suda. So the next time they have another Suda. So she ends off. So there's 2 times in the story that the king puts out the scepter to her. And the second time is when so the decree is already made that the Jews there's going to be a war, civil war, so to speak, against the Jews. And once that edict has been put in place, it can't change. So what she does is she asks him, she begs for mercy from him. She cries to him, and he puts out a scepter again. And then he says, well, what is it? And so she says, we're about to die. Can we change? And he goes, take the seal, and you can do whatever you want with it. And basically, you can change it any way you want. And so we're going to discuss the 2 scepters being put out, and why are they different, and what does it mean in spiritual terms. And we're going to rip off the physical story and look at it in the spiritual aspects of it, and also what it means for us. It's beautiful. Okay, I guess we'll do it in English. So it's from this book. One second, let's see. There's a comment. There's a link. There is not. This is from Heritage Series. Vayoshet Hamelech Esther. I'm sorry, I don't think they have it online. I can try to look for it. Anyway, we'll take some photos, whatever. So we'll start it off. It's page 24, if anyone has it. Okay, so the king extended the golden scepter to Esther, and Esther rose and stood before the king. So that's what happens. So says in the Megillah. She comes into him. She comes in, and she hasn't been seen in a while, and this is a life and death situation. And he's very kind to her, and he puts out his scepter. What happens? This is the second one. And she rose and stood before the king. So this is the second time it happens. So what happens? So we find a few discrepancies between our verse and a similar one in the previous chapter. This was the second time this happens. Early in the Megillah, it says the king extended to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So it says over there, it was in his hand. Here, however, this point is omitted. It doesn't say it was in his hands. Also, before it was written that Esther touched the tip of the scepter, whereas from our verse, it would seem that he gave her the entire scepter. it seems like in our verse that he puts out the scepter, she holds on to it, and she pulls herself up with her. Whereas in the other one, which is the first time it happens, it says she touches it. He puts out a scepter, she touches it, and then he goes. So this is seemingly a simple part of the story, but what's going on over here? Furthermore, what is the timeless message contained in the story? This is Alter Rebbe is asking, what does this mean for us? So let's see. Mystical Esther concealment. To understand all this, we must first explain the mystical meaning of the word Esther. So now we're going to understand that Esther is really all of us. The Jewish people are Esther. How? During Galus, the Jewish people are called Esther in the sense of concealment of godliness, as we find in the verse that I will oddly hide, Haster, Aster, my face in that day. It says in the Gemara, where do we know, like the story of the Megillah, where's Esther? This is Esther Minayin. So it says, Haster, Aster, I will hide myself on that day. Just like in the Megillah, we don't have God's name, God is hidden. And so too, we see that this is a reference to the name of Esther. But Esther is someone of godliness. And like Jewish people in Galus, we're in Galus, there is concealment of godliness. So that's how we are like Esther. The face of God refers to the divine presence. So that's when it's concealed. But the face of God is divine presence. As it says, may God shine his countenance, face upon you. He's now during exile, but at the moment we're in exile, so we don't have that face. Hidden as is intimated in the word by Yom Hahu, on that day. Yom Hahu, that day connotes divine radiance. Yom is that it's not present and manifest. While Yom Hazeh, this day connotes radiance manifest. This is when you look at godliness, you say this, you see godliness. Whereas when we said Yom Hahu is that is something that's distant from us. So he's saying we're in Galus is Yom Hahu, that day, meaning something's going to happen. Yom Hazeh means now it's a revelation of godliness. And so we're living in this time of Galus, this time of Esther, Haster. More specifically, this concealment exists within the soul of every single Jew, not just in the Jewish people as a whole, but within each and one of us, we have this concealment. And how do we have this concealment? So when the spark of godliness that is in the soul is buried and gabbed in coarse physical thought, speech, and action, so when we're thinking, speaking, and acting in ways that aren't godly, that aren't with a good purpose, aren't trying to make our lives better and connect more to godliness and have more of a relation of God in our life, we're making bad decisions. So then we have that concealment. Divine radiance cannot reside and be manifest within one's being. And we have to think about this. We try to make this more something we can connect to, is that we have to think to ourselves, what's something in my life that is not working out the way I want it to be? And it's separating me, it's not connecting me to godliness the way I want it to be. And everyone can spend some time thinking about this and not think, do it throughout the day. And that thing is what we're talking about. It's concealing our godliness. It's making us Hester. It's not by Yom Hazeh, not this day. It's Yom Hahu, that day. It's something very different from us. We're distancing ourselves from godliness. Consequently, one will not be filled with the burning desire to cleave to God with an open heart, lacking the kind of love. And what happens? So when you're doing those things and you're making those bad choices, so what ends up happening? Well, they can see him. Making those bad choices, it's causing not just you doing the bad choice, but it's making you separated or less open heart to godliness, lacking the kind of love that is as a firm grasp and a fix in one's mind and heart. So we're wondering why we're not connected to God, why we don't feel that godliness. He's saying when you're doing the things that are separating for you, it's like eating junk food and not doing enough exercise and sleep and wondering why it's hard for me to run. It's not hard for you to run because there's something wrong with you. It's hard for you to run because you're not doing the right thing to be doing. And it's not hard for us to connect to godliness as much as we're not doing the things that we need to be doing to help us connect to the godliness. So one's love towards God will instead be encompassing from above, makif. So therefore, your love to God will be a very makif one. It's very, it comes out in certain times, but it's not permeated within us. Signifying a type of love that exists solely on a subconscious level, he explains here. So this subliminal manifestation is what we hope for, kivinu, as opposed to hu, which connotes concealment. That's what we want versus the hu, which is b'yom, like we said, b'yom hu, on that day hu, which is concealment. So what we want is that we have one that's filled, not a a manifest one, not a subconscious level of godliness. And how do we do it? By making that these right choices. Because we see from Esther is this concealment. The Jewish people are in Galus in general concealment, and in ourselves we have this concealment. Chapter 3, holy days, time of transcendence. And now we're going to add to this, like what's the difference between Purim and how and why Purim is the greatest of all Yom Tovim versus the other Yom Tovim. Holidays, times of transcendence. So our sages have said that all the Jewish festivals will be abolished in the Messianic age, save for the holiday of Purim. So everything's going to be, when Mashiach comes, going to be no Pesach, no Shavuos, no Sukkot, but Purim will stay. As the verse declares, and these days of Purim will never pass from among the Jews, nor shall their memory depart from their descendants. Likewise, the sages maintain halacha, also with the halacha, and I think maybe we'll skip it in that part of the maamer, just so we can get on the Purim track and try to get the whole vart. Will not be abolished in future time. So we see here that there's two things: is Purim and halacha will never be abolished. Now, why Purim? Out of all Yom Tov, Purim is not such a great Yom Tov. Seemingly, we can walk on Purim, we can drive on Purim, we can do an halacha. Unlike on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, he's saying Purim is greater than Yom Kippur. So the meaning of this is, on Shabbos and festivals, there is a colossal shift in creation, in which all the worlds and the sparks of divinity contained therein transcend their usual standing and are elevated to a higher state. So on Shabbos, Yom Tov, the world gets raised up. We see in ourselves how our life is much different. Every Jewish soul, being a spark of divinity, also experiences this elevation caused by an intensification of divine radiance during these times, and we feel it. That's why Shabbos Yom Tov is different. Our conversations are different. You know, I remember we got to the mills on like Yom Tov before Corona, and we'd walk home, and you're not in a rush anywhere. So we walk. You walk at a leisurely pace. I remember Levi telling us, he's why are we walking so slow? Let's go. And I'm like, I can walk. Like finally, I'm not in a rush anywhere. So if Shabbos and Yom Tov has this elevation of godliness, so everything's different, even within ourselves. Thus, on these special days, the soul is injected with extra light, joy, and spiritual ecstasy, inflaming the soul to cleave to God with greater passion than usual. That's what happened in Shabbos Yom Tov. And they help us, not just, and also it says in the note here that it continues on throughout the year, like it drags off out. But Shabbos Yom Tov, we have this revelation. It's good. Like we see for ourselves on Tishrei, we're a lot more inspired than in the middle of the winter. Particularly during the holiday of Pesach, the radiance and supernal love which emanates from the divine loving kindness, chesed, shines within every soul in Pesach. Consequently, every Jewish soul's spark is elevated to a place of spiritual sensitivity, where it is aroused with tremendous love and passion for God. On Pesach, you might feel a lot more sensitive to godliness and God and wanting to be connected, and a commitment to completely eradicating any obstacles that might comprise this love, i.e. worldly possessions that by their very definition oppose and contradict love of God. And then at that point, you might feel, I'm doing things I shouldn't be doing. I don't want to do those things. They're taking me away from God. I want to be connected to God. And you have this inspiration, like you're by a Verbringen. You have these inspirations. You're like, I want life to be different. I want to be more connected. I want to learn more. I want to make better choices. I want to daven every morning. And everyone has their thing they want to do. And that's what happens. You're inspired of Yom Tov, like on Pesach. The process of breaking one's worldly desires is called l'achfaya l'sitra achra, forcing the negative desires to be under the guide of one's spiritual drive, meaning to make the choice. Who's making the decision in my life? The nefesh elokis. And that's what you're doing. You're subjugating the klippa, and you're saying, no, my nefesh elokis is going to make the decisions. What did my nefesh elokis tell me now? Should I go to sleep, or should I be staying up? Should I learn, or should I go to work? Should I eat? Should I sleep? Whatever it is, am I saying the right things? Am I speaking nicely to myself? Am I speaking nicely to other people? And things like this. And that's what we're trying to do. We'll stop here. And we'll continue tomorrow. We're running through this, actually, a very good pace. And what I'm going to say is that good question. So the question was asked, what's the difference between Yom Hazeh and Yom Hahu? Yom Hazeh means this. Like when you point to something, you say this. When you point to something, you see it. So Zeh is a connotation of something that's here, present. Hahu, but Yom Hahu, on that day, what does that day mean? It's like, in the future. It's distant. It's distant from us. So that's what he's saying. He's saying that we want to be Zeh, like godliness. You want to say Zeh Kelev Yanveil. This is my God, and also this, meaning you point, you see it. And he's going to talk about this, that ultimately when Mashiach comes, that's how it's going to be. And Purim is Me'ein, Mashiach comes. That's why Purim doesn't ever get nullified, because Purim is not like an Aliyam Tovim. Aliyam Tovim is an additional added light of godliness. Whereas Purim is a whole different manifestation and a whole different level. And so that's why we have this concept of Zeh, which is seeing it clearly, like in our lives. You want to see godliness, not that it's somewhere that one day I'll see it, I'll connect it, but Zeh that is this. Does that explain it a little bit better? Okay, if sure anyone can ask more questions, you can post on the WhatsApp or post in Michal, just pass on to me. Yeah, and we'll be continuing tomorrow. We're doing good. So just to summarize quickly, is that Esther, we understand the story in the Megillah that Esther gets the staff, she goes to the king and he puts out a staff for her. By the first time that happens, she only gets to tap the scepter, whereas the second time it happens, she gets to hold on to the scepter, seemingly just to pick her up. But what's going on over here? And Alter Rebbe says, what does that mean for us? So we have to understand, first of all, we have Esther. Esther is this concept of concealment. The old Jewish people in Galus are like this Esther, that we're concealed. So we're going to understand, once we understand where Esther, we have to understand what is a scepter and what is touching the scepter versus holding the scepter mean. And then we said, together with that, so it's not just the Jewish people as a whole are like Esther, but us in particular, when we're separated from godliness and we're not making the right choices, we have Esther. Then we said that on Purim is never going to be destroyed. Last lava, Mashiach comes, is going to be Purim and Halacha. Why? Why is Purim greater than Aliyam Tovim? Why does it not get abolished? So we said the Aliyam Tovim, you get additional added light, a level of godliness, a level that inspires us and infuses us and even affects the rest of the time period. And I'm going to continue talking about how Purim is a totally different wavelength than that. Thank you very much for joining and have a great day.